What's going on, everybody? What's happening? It is Tuesday, April the 16th, 2024, 12:16 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That intro is just not long enough. It's not long enough. Let's do it again. Yes, episode 252 of McRae Live. My name's Dave McRae, coming to you live from the Voiceman Studios in Toronto, Canada. April the 16th, we're halfway through April. May is around the corner. Oh, geez, I got the wrong bar up. Hang on one second. I got the wrong bar up. There you go. That's better. That's better. People were probably watching that going, wait, what? Horror movie nights? What's going on? Maybe nobody noticed it. I didn't even notice it. That was, hey, that's a great shameless plug. If you want to be part of horror movie nights, we just watched Friday the 13th, part 4. You can hit that join button and join level number 2, and you can join in on horror movie nights. So there you go. Had to switch it out. No, this is not horror movie nights. This is McRae Live. So anyways, folks, welcome to episode 252 of McRae Live. And today on the show, I want to talk about Blumhouse. I really liked Flick Symmetry in the chat there. He said, I think it should be called Blumboot. It's true, really. I mean, with all the reboots, requels, and, all the shit they're doing now, I mean, they might as well, he's Jason Boot. He's Jason Blumboot. And he's the head honcho of Blumboot. There's a little bit of truth to that, I think. So anyway, yeah, look, well, you know what? Let's jump over to this is not new news in the sense of it's like, almost a week old now. But let's jump over to the other screen. There's a few things I want to read today. So let's jump over to the other screen and check this out. Okay, so this comes to us, of course, from John Squires at Bloody Disgusting. This is from 6 days ago on April the 10th, 2024. Blumhouse and Lionsgate join forces for brand new The Blair Witch Project, ladies and gentlemen. The Blair Witch Project. 25 years after the release of the original genre-changing classic, Lionsgate and Blumhouse announced out of CinemaCon today, well, that was 6 days ago, that they will partner on the development and production of a new The Blair Witch Project movie as the first film in a multi-picture pact with Blumhouse, reimagining horror classics from the Lionsgate library. So, The Blair Witch Project is not the only horror movie from the Lionsgate library that Blumhouse is planning on rebooting, reimagining, and maybe destroying. I don't know. The announcement was made today by Adam Fogelson, chair of Lionsgate Motion Picture Group, and Jason Blum, or Blumboot, as he may be known now, thanks to Flick Symmetry, founder and CEO of Blumhouse. Based at Universal Pictures, where it has a first look deal. Now that just simply means that when you have a first look deal with a studio, that just simply means that they get first dibs on anything that you are thinking about wanting to move into production. So Blumhouse has a first look deal with Universal Pictures. Blumhouse is the gold standard in the horror space, which is true, really. I mean, hey, they are the leaders, for better or worse. They are. I mean, listen, if Blumhouse came to me and said, hey, listen, Dave, we'd love you to direct this horror movie, and maybe it was a horror movie that I'm really passionate about, or maybe it was one I wanted to bring to the table, or maybe it had nothing to do with me. They were just hiring me as a director. I probably wouldn't say no, and neither would you. They are who they are, for better or worse. They generate blockbuster results from a string of modestly budgeted films, including the Paranormal Activity franchise, Insidious, The Purge, Sinister, Halloween, Five Nights at Freddy's, and Megan, to name a few, really, along with award winners Get Out and Black Klansman. Blumhouse films have grossed nearly $6 billion at the worldwide box office. Blum will team with producer Roy Lee on the new Blair Witch Project movie. Lee previously produced the 2016 film Blair Witch, the most recent installment in the franchise. Quote, I have been incredibly fortunate to work with Jason many times over the years. We forged a strong relationship on The Purge when I was at Universal, and we launched STX with his film, The Gift. There is no one better at this genre than the team at Blumhouse. It's probably true. From a business perspective, he's probably right, said Ferguson. We are thrilled to kick this partnership off with a new vision for Blair Witch. A new vision for Blair Witch. Now, pay attention to that, ladies. A new vision. What could it mean? I don't know. That will reintroduce this horror classic for a new generation. We couldn't be more pleased to be working with the team, with them on this and other projects we look forward to revealing soon. End quote. Quote, I'm very grateful to Adam and the team at Lionsgate. This is Jason Blum now, I'm assuming. I'm very grateful to Adam and the team at Lionsgate for letting us play in their sandbox. I'm a huge admirer of the Blair Witch Project, which brought the idea of found footage horror to the mainstream audiences and became a true cultural phenomenon. Facts, said Blum. He goes on to say, I don't think there would have been a Paranormal Activity had there not first been a Blair Witch. Quite possibly true. So this feels like a truly special opportunity, and I'm excited to see where it leads. Money, 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 money. That's what they're hoping for. Let me see here. All right. Found footage masterpiece, The Blair Witch Project, changed the game back in 1999, subsequently spawning its own sprawling universe of media, including official follow-up films in 2000 and 2016, as well as multiple books and video games that have deepened the lure. The Blair Witch Project was created by filmmakers Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. And that's that there. So that was the official announcement 7 days ago, or 6 days ago, I should say. And what do some of the filmmakers feel about the Blair Witch Project? Well, let's find out. This comes to us from IndieWire. This was today. The Blair Witch Project star Joshua Leonard slams Lionsgate over reboot. It's been 25 years of disrespect. Again, this comes to us from IndieWire. Back in 1999, Joshua Leonard made his acting debut in the now iconic found footage film, The Blair Witch Project. In the last 25 years, that's hard to believe it's been 25 years. I saw it in the theater. Hit that like button if you saw it in the theater. In the last 25 years, he's directed 5 of his own films and starred in dozens of others, but is still fighting to be taken seriously in Hollywood. At last week's CinemaCon, Lionsgate and Blumhouse announced the development of The Blair Witch Project Reboot. Leonard's face was on the press release, but in an April 12th social media post, he said he knew nothing about the project. Nothing about the project, ladies and gentlemen. Which is really no surprise if you think about it. Quote, this is my face on the press release for a film being made by 2 major studios. Both I've worked for, both I respect, Leonard wrote on Facebook. The weird part is that I didn't know anything about it until a friend sent me a congrats screenshot yesterday. My frustration is compounded by the fact that I've been trying to get Lionsgate to engage for over a month about a Blair Witch Project charity screening I'm putting together for I don't have my glasses. Opposite of Fest? Opposite of Fest? Is that how you say it? I'm trying to phonetically sound that out. It's got an at to it. Anyway, whatever festival that is, to raise money for artists without health care. And no one will get back to me. No one will get back to me. So he's been trying to put together a charity screening of the Blair Witch Project. He's reached out to, Lionsgate, and nobody's getting back to him. The disrespect. Leonard added that the news made him start thinking a lot about this let me try that again. Leonard added that the news made him start, quote, thinking a lot about this time. After seeing my Blair Witch Project collaborators recently and sharing memories, sweet and fucked up ones. Sweet and fucked up ones. He then went on to list a series of assertions surrounding the release of the Blair Witch Project and later navigation of Hollywood. Quote, in 1999, Blair Witch Project's OG distributor, Artisan Entertainment, later acquired by Lionsgate, claimed to have released the most profitable independent film ever. It was, according to all reports, it was the first movie since the original Halloween from 1978. It went on to become the highest grossing independent horror movie in motion picture history. Bought for $1 million, grossed $250 million, while internally they told us that, let me try that again. In 1999, Blair Witch Project original distributor Artisan Entertainment, later acquired by Lionsgate, claimed to have released the most profitable independent film of all time. That's right. Bought for $1 million, grossed $250 million. While internally, they told us they were actually losing money from marketing expenses. So we might wind up owing them money, is what Leonard wrote, excuse me. A Hollywood insider told the press that we, the actors, were paid $4 million as a buyout for our partnership points, while in reality, we made $300,000 and never saw another dime. After buying a car and paying off his student loans, Mike Williams was back moving furniture within 12 months of the release, while still on magazine covers. Leonard continued that since the found footage film blurred the lines of narrative filmmaking and reality, we're going to talk about that here in a minute, there were more complex legal issues. Quote, because we used our real names in the first film, the studio claimed copyright. We had to take them to federal court to win our names back, Leonard wrote. He goes on to say, there were many factors that made Blair Witch Project a success. Timing, marketing, etc. But there was also the fact that us weirdos got together with virtually no resources and made a film that worked. Can we just go on record and say that the film itself is a huge part of why we're still talking about it 25 years later? End quote. He goes on to say, quote, the Blair Witch is this Leonard saying this? I don't know. The Blair Witch Project was released in 1999 and grossed a whopping $248 million at the worldwide box office. Was it the worldwide box office or just domestically? It might have been just domestically. I think it was worldwide, but who knows? Was it released worldwide? I don't know. Anyway, $240 million at the global. There it is at the global box office. Excuse me. It says right there, Dave. Put on your fucking glasses, McRae. The feature spawned 2 additional franchise films, plus the Lionsgate-operated Las Vegas escape room experience, Escape Blair Witch. Quote, I'm so proud of our little punk rock movie, and I love that the fans keep the flames burning, Leonard concluded. But at this point, it's 25 years of disrespect from the folks who pocketed the lion's share, pun intended, of the profits from our work, and that feels both icky and classless. Well, we'll talk about this in a second. Leonard later shared with IndieWire that after his Facebook post, a representative from Lionsgate did respond to his charity screening request 6 weeks since his initial outreach. Well, they're only doing it because he, lambasted them publicly. Leonard told Lionsgate that he was deeply saddened it took a public effort to make a bunch of noise, calling the studio out on social media for a representative to reply. Quote, the excuses just make me angry, Leonard wrote, as prolonging the gaslighting within attempts at retroactive appeasement feel like a further insult, end quote. After the Blair Witch Project's success, Leonard went on to star in the horror film Unseen and made his directorial debut in 2011 with The Lie, and co-wrote and starred in and helmed the 2021 indie Fully Realized Humans. So there you go. 2 interesting articles, right? Obviously, there was the announcement article. And of course, there's this article here talking about one of the stars of the movie. And fascinating stuff indeed. Fascinating stuff indeed. So here's the situation. Here are my thoughts. So what do I think about this? Okay. All right. So first, let me say this. It can be really tricky when you are hearing what Leonard and company have gone through. Leonard's his name, right? Yeah. Have gone through with the Blair Witch Project and how really they've seen themselves, although they were the stars of the movie and they've seen very little in the way of, financial windfall and success and all that kind of stuff. And that's not surprising. This is not unprecedented when you are dealing with, maybe it's trickier to do now because of, social media and because, there's more accountability in Hollywood now, although it is still lacking in accountability. There's still at least a little more accountability now, and it's a little more difficult to get away with things today than it was 25, 30, 40, 50 years ago. The problem is in 1999 when this movie came out, and he's absolutely right. It was, and we're going to talk about this here in a second as it relates to Blumhouse and my thoughts on why I think this, may not be the best idea. But it was an indie film made for however much it cost. How much did it cost? $100,000 or something like that? No, $30,000. It was very, very low. And it made $248 million at the worldwide box office. The return on that is just ridiculous, really, at the end of the day. The highest grossing independent horror movie of all time. The problem is, because these guys and gal, because the people involved in the making of the Blair Witch Project were not seasoned professionals, and remember, this is 1999, okay? They're not seasoned professionals. They are, I'm not saying that they're not good. I'm just saying like seasoned, right? You know what I mean? They're not seasoned. They weren't, for most of them, I think, if not all of them, it was their first acting job. They used their real names. They weren't actors. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it was, so I don't even know, did they have representatives? And if they did have agents, did they have good agents, right? I doubt they were represented by WMA and, or UTA or CAA, right? WME, excuse me. I doubt they were represented by William Morris Endeavor or CAA or UT. I doubt that, right? And those are three of the biggest agencies in the world. Now, they're not the only agencies, obviously. There are other agencies in Hollywood and around the world. There's, boutique agencies and so on and so forth that are totally professional and totally pro. But were they repped at that time? I don't know. Maybe they were. And then the question becomes, well, who were they repped by? And then the question becomes, well, how good were the negotiations, right? Like how, nobody thought that it was going to go off and do this thing. And then maybe, yes, retroactively, they're trying to get their foot in the door. Oh, hang on, maybe we need to. And did Hollywood take advantage of them and exploit the naivety and exploit the fact that they were who they were and they weren't dealing with Tom Cruise and Harrison Ford and that? Yeah, probably. There's a little bit of that. I don't doubt that probably maybe was the case. You can't do that with, A-list actors. You can't even do it with B-list actors who are properly represented, who have managers and agents, whatever the case is. So, it could be a situation. Look, take Sylvester Stallone, okay? Sylvester Stallone today is still fighting for the rights to the Rocky franchise, right? I'm a little hazy on the details, but to give the Cliff Notes version, Stallone, he gave up a lot in order to be able to star in the movie, right? And be able to do it his way and he gave up a lot. He gave up a lot. And he's paying for it a little bit now. Now you might be thinking, but it's Sylvester Stallone. That was 45 years ago. He still, that's why there was that whole thing with Winkler and wanting to get the rights for the whole Rocky thing because he wants something to leave to his kids. But it's not that he's rich beyond belief. It's not about the money. It's about sort of, a negotiation, something he did 45 years ago in order to get his way because he was a fucking nobody. He was a nobody. He had no leverage. And so, again, I'm drawing a little bit of a loose comparison, but the principles are the same. So my question only is this. Basically, the point I'm making is that I get what this gentleman is saying, and I have no doubt that he's absolutely right, that they have been taken advantage of. They have lost out on some things, and maybe they have not been taken as seriously, but it's primarily because of the lack of leverage they had from the foundation, right? The Blair Witch Project was it was this little indie thing that took off, and they were nobodies. And I don't even know if they even had agents. Maybe they did. I don't know. So, it's unfortunate that he's been dealing with this, or they've been, I'm sure it's different, for each person. But again, without knowing the nitty gritty details, but knowing how the industry works, I can certainly say that is likely part of the problem here, is that way back when all of this stuff would have been negotiated, or things in writing and signing things and all that kinds of, it just was never done because nobody thought it was going to become what it became. And they weren't even actors. Do you know what I mean? And so it was a lack of experience, naivety, and I'm sure I'm not saying it's the only thing. Again, there's a lot of variables, a lot of nuance with these types of things, but I'm sure that's part of the situation here. And yeah, he has been probably, it's not like it's not like anybody from the Blair Witch Project in terms of the 3 actors in the movie have taken off and become so. They haven't, because they were really never actors to begin with, right? And so it's just one of those things where it's kind of a bummer. It's a bit tricky. So I feel for the guy. I do. And he's still trying to make himself known and make indie films, and shout out to him. And I think that's terrific, man. Just keep doing your thing and keep rocking. Now, when it comes to Blumhouse and doing this, here's the thing. So, again, this is show business, and any studio production company, they want to make money. And the Blair Witch Project is a big name. Now, it's not the only name. It's not the only movie they have that they've negotiated here to be able to obtain from the Lionsgate library. This is just one of several reboots that they want to do of Lionsgate horror films. What those horror films are, I don't know. And it says explicitly in the article, this is a reimagining of the Blair Witch property, of the Blair Witch story. So here's the thing. For those of you that are old enough to remember when the Blair Witch Project came out, and I've talked about this before on the channel, and Tony Michael and I have talked about this on, Two Dudes, but it bears repeating here because it's important. If you're old enough to remember when the movie came out, and I don't mean, you have to be of a certain age. So yes, maybe you were born in 1993, so you're old enough to remember when it came out in 1999, but in 99, you would have been 6 and probably have a very vague, hazy recollection of it. Only in retrospect and through documentaries and footage, and thanks to social media and the internet, it makes it a bit more clear for you. But in 1999, I was 20. So I remember it very well. And so if you're over the age of 40, you probably have a very good idea of it. And in 1999, the internet, as we know it today, was still relative. It was relatively in its infancy, right? There was no social media, like literally. There was no no Facebook, no YouTube, no Instagram, no Snapchat. And I don't mean to sound condescending, but if you're young, if you're in your 20s, you have no idea. You have no idea. You've grown up in the digital age, so you can you see it in movies, but you didn't live through it. So it didn't exist. I didn't have my first email address till I was 19. So there was no smartphones. There were cell phones, yes, but diddly dee diddly dee diddly dee dee. Those kind of cell phones. So it was a very different world. And in 1999. When it comes to the internet and information online, I remember in 1999, my first year of college, the internet was, MSN Messenger and Hotmail chat rooms, and Yahoo was Google was there. It was just starting to come up and make it big. It was kind of on the horizon, but Yahoo was the big search engine then. Netscape was your what you would open. So there was a lot of, it was very, very different. So the naivety of the internet and reading things online and being able to fool people online, it's still pretty, thanks to AI now too. It's just compounded. But back then we were a little more naive, right? And it's still easy to fool people online, but certainly back then. And so the ease of access to information and the ease of access to be able to, Nobody was doing these kinds of shows. There were no movie shows. There was no YouTube. You weren't watching shows. Cable was still dominating. I mean, it was very different. The internet was very different. And dial-up was still huge. Dial-up was still huge. Just setting the stage here, folks. So in 1999, marketing movies using the internet was not really a thing. It wasn't that it didn't exist, but it pretty much didn't exist because Hollywood and the media and everything, they were still trying to figure out the internet in terms of how can we utilize this best to our advantage. Oh, hey, we could throw up a website. We could throw up a www on the World Wide Web. You know, and we could do something there, just a simple HTML site, and we'll put up some photos that'll take like 36 minutes to load when you click on the site. Do you guys remember that? When you'd go to like a website and it would take like, 5 minutes for the photo to kind of just, kind of load, and then, you're sitting there and you're eating your lunch and you've gone to take a shit and you come back and finally it's loaded. That was the day, right? That was the day. And what they did with the Blair Witch Project at that time was ingenious. It was really, really special because they took advantage of the naivety and the infancy of sort of the technology, even though it was incredible technology, compared to where we are today with the internet, is what I'm saying, right? So again, it's all relative. But they took advantage of the internet and marketed this movie as if it was real. Nowadays, that's virtually impossible to do. Not totally, but virtually impossible to do. Because of the ease of access and flow of information, the fact-checking that's going on, people, even though it's still there are still a lot of dumb people out there that can be fooled on the internet, I'm just saying. But it is more difficult, right? People are questioning things a bit more. People are being held accountable a bit more. There's fact-checking going on. Like, you know what I mean, right? Like it's harder. So to do something like the Blair Witch today in 2024, in terms of drumming up this aura and this mystique, like, whoa, fuck, it's virtually impossible. Like, I mean, I don't see, I'm not saying it can't be done, but, but at that time, and because they were unknown actors, and I feel comfortable as going far to say that not really actors. I mean, I know maybe they've done a few little things, but it's not like it was the Blair Witch Project starring, Tom Cruise, right? I mean, they're nobodies, right? And it was shot on 16, I believe. And, it's home movie, and it was just found footage movies. I know there's Cannibal Holocaust. And it's not that the Blair Witch was the first found footage movie ever, but it wasn't a commonplace, right? The term found footage wasn't like in the zeitgeist as it is today. And so it was very different. And I remember the radio ads. Yeah, that's right. People still listen to the radio then. I know they still do now, but you know what I'm saying. I remember being in my car with my dad, and, we'd be going somewhere because it was summer of 99. So I hadn't quite left for college yet. And I remember being in the car with my dad and, it coming on the radio, like, the most scariest film of all time. It was like, what the fuck is this? Like, it was like, what? Like that mystique was still there, and you heard like, ah! Ah! And just the quality of the audio sounded real. It didn't sound polished or mixed and mastered. Do you know what I mean? Like it sounded, like it like raw, and then it just like, and then all you hear is like, the Blair Witch Project starts Friday in theaters everywhere. It's just like, what the hell is this? It was the old, like it's way back in the day when they still said things like starts Friday in theaters everywhere. Check your local listings for details and showtimes. Do you remember that? Right? And you had to look in the newspaper and all that kind of shit. I mean, this is the era we're talking about. And I know it's not that long ago, and I'm not trying to, make, I mean, it's not that, it's 25 years, but technology expands exponentially. right? And it's just going to continue to expand and grow and grow and grow at a faster rate under a shorter period of time. So, 25 years ago, I mean, compared to where we are now, like, it was very different. Nobody was, it was just, you still went to the back of the newspaper to look to see what the showtimes were. And so this is the era, it's at the tail end of that era, mind you. To be fair, it's at the tail end of that era, but that's the era it is. And so hearing that and not having that ease of access to information to be able to do your research and figure out that it's fake and figure out that, no, it's all a ruse. It's all marketing. It's all part of the shtick. You couldn't just easily do that. It just wasn't there. Now, oh my God, it would be on X in fucking tweet. Oh, I mean, it would just, nobody, it's so hard to fool people today in terms of marketing a movie. And so that kind of thing, it was scary. My mom watched the movie at home. She rented it, watched it, thinking it was real. And then I eventually told her it wasn't, and she felt that she was duped. It fooled a lot of people, And of course, there were people that knew it wasn't real. I knew it wasn't real because I knew where to look, and I did. And I was like, is this real? This can't be real. It's real? It's real? Holy shit. Of course, I knew where to look, and, I had movie savvy friends and all that kind of stuff. But fooling the average moviegoer, oh my God. You know what I mean? And even some movie guys were like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? So the mystique and the aura that was created around the Blair Witch Project being real, you've got to go see this documentary in the theater. It's, it's like The Exorcist days where it's like, it's the scariest movie of all time. Like it kind of had that mystique around it, a bit different, but it kind of had that mystique. So why do I say all this? Why do I sit here and tell you all this? Okay. Because for better or worse, that was one of the major driving forces of its success. When you watch the Blair Witch Project on its own merits, it's fine. It's fine, right? It's fine. But the mystique that was created around the marketing for the Blair Witch Project, the hype was astronomical. I also worked in a movie theater in 1999, the summer before I went to college. And I was there. I was one of the ushers. I worked in the movie theater. And I remember, I've told this before, I remember one of the things they utilized with the marketing of the Blair Witch Project was it was all part of the mystique. It's so scary, you'll throw up. Like I mean, and the media was talking about this. People were throwing up coming out of the theater, and that was true. People were. I saw it. But here's the catch. Unlike Terrifier 2, okay, where people are leaving the movie theater feeling nauseous and sick and some even barfing because of what they are seeing on screen, and because of the brutality and the blood and the guts and the gore and the splatter, exploitation, grotesque nature of Terrifier, that's not why people were throwing up with the Blair Witch Project. They were throwing up because of motion sickness, because they're watching a film shot on 16 that is a home movie that's doing a lot of this. And when you're watching a lot of this on a gigantic 30-foot screen for, 90 minutes, if you suffer from motion sickness, which I do, or can, I'm not saying I do all the time under every circumstance, but I certainly, I can, that's what happens. And I remember going to the concessions and getting a bunch of little doggy bag popcorn bags. They were like white, they were small, they were like this. They're probably for kids or something. And I got like a stack of them, and I went to this girl that was working with me. She was kind of cute. I forget her name. No idea where she is now, but she was kind of cute. And I told her to come with me, probably because I thought she was cute. Hey, come on. to help me out, hand out doggy bags. And this was at a time when, I don't know if they did this in the States, but here in Canada, when the big movie theaters, like the big multiplexes first started kind of becoming a thing in the 90s, with you'd have like a theater that had 24 theaters in it, you know what I mean? And you'd had like the stadium style seating and everything. Like that was all new, right? And in the beginning, they used to have people introducing the movies. And I was one of the guys that got to introduce them, like, hey, everybody, welcome to the Coliseum. The movie runtime is this, it's starring this, and completely unnecessary. Like, you did not need that job at all. And those jobs don't exist anymore. And I think it's primarily because they probably had most of the wrong people doing it. I was quite good at it, no surprise. But that was one of my jobs. And so I got this girl. I said, hey, I'm about to go into the theater to introduce the Blair Witch Project. Come on in with me to hand out the doggy bags. The barf bags. And so during the opening of that, I said, hey, everybody, welcome to the Blair Witch Project. It's an hour and 38 minutes, whatever the hell it is. I just want to say, and I said this, I said, does anybody here suffer from motion sickness? And the only reason why I ask is because of and I just went through the whole thing. And literally like a quarter of the theater put their hands up. And so this girl and I went up and down the aisles handing out these little popcorn bags to these people that may feel they're not going to make it to the bathroom and they need something to barf in. Literally, that's true. So, but that's not how the media portrayed it, right? The marketing behind it was, it's so scary, you'll be puking in the aisles. And it's like, yeah, that's great. I mean, that's great marketing. But again, 1999, and unless you worked at the movie theater or you caught on to what was happening, you would have bought into it. So the mystique that surrounded the Blair Witch Project was huge. Why else would this movie, which they shot for nothing, which is a documentary style film, shot half POV. I mean, it's like watching a newscast for 90 minutes. It made nearly $250 million in 1999. Holy shit. Why? Is it because it's a phenomenal film? Is it because it's one of the greatest horror films ever made? Now, listen, maybe you feel that way. That's fine. I don't. No. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. It's not a bad movie. Not at all. I'm just simply saying that the main reason why it did so well was because not everybody, I shouldn't say that, a large portion of the population thought what they were going to see was real. Was real. Not everybody. I'm not saying you. But a lot of people did. And they were like, I got to check this out. You know what I'm saying? So that's been the mystique that has surrounded the Blair Witch Project. And that's been the aura and the kind of the coolness of it. In 2000, Book of Shadows comes out, completely changes the dynamic and the execution, and fails miserably. In 2016, Blair Witch comes out, and I thought Blair Witch was okay. I thought it was okay. I mean, certainly better than Book of Shadows. I think that's the name of it, right? The sequel. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was great. I did have my issues with it. But again, Blair Witch 2016 should be able to show you, because they try to almost replicate the found footage style of Blair Witch. But it didn't have nearly the mystique. It didn't have the mystique. It didn't have the aura. It didn't have that mystique, that aura around it. Why? Because we all know now that it's fake. No matter how good the production value is in replicating something that feels real, we all know it's not. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get close to it feeling absolutely real, and it really does a one on our mind and tricks our mind. And for the 90 minutes we're watching a movie, we're like, fuck, that was so scary. It felt so real. Sure. Not saying that can't be done. But the cat's out of the bag. The curtain's been pulled back. We know now. And so And part of the thing that was so great about the Blair Witch as well is that everything was so raw. You know, all the audio was raw. You know, the sound effects. I mean, again, I don't know, to be fair, I don't know how much post they did on it in terms of like what sort of sound design they did. I'm sure they did something for sure. I mean, they didn't just take it off the reel and, you know, here you go, movie theaters. I mean, I'm sure they did something. They edited it, they put something together. But everything felt so real, you know, like the sounds from the nature and the, you know, the footsteps, and nothing sounded overly mixed, overly mastered, overly produced. It didn't feel polished, right? It didn't feel polished. Blair Witch 2016 feels polished. It feels polished, right? The production value feels polished. Yes, it's a found footage movie, but it has a polish to it. And so, you know what I'm saying? So I question, what are we doing with Blair Witch here? And, you know, again, in the article, it says we are, what does it say? We are, hang on a sec here. Let me go over here. I want to make sure I get this. I don't even know if I'm going to find it here. I'm probably not going to find it here. But basically it says they are reimagining it, right? We're going to reimagine Blair Witch. Well, if you're going to reimagine Blair Witch, what does that mean? Are they going to take a remake out of found footage and into, you know, just a regular narrative film? It might be the best way to do that. It might be the best way to do that. And I don't think they should do anything with it, to be totally honest with you. I think there's more important fish to fry than the Blair Witch Project, but it's a gigantic property and they want to capitalize on gigantic IPs. Well, I'm not even going to say it's a gigantic property. I would say it was a gigantic film. And they want to see if they can do something with it. And I get it. I totally understand it from a business perspective. But reimagining it, so what do they mean by that? Well, one of the options is like I said, they're going to take it out of the POV, out of the out of the found footage realm, out of that subgenre, and make it just a regular narrative piece. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, that's dog shit, they can't do that. Well, what would you prefer? Right? Maybe, I mean, obviously you would probably prefer they don't do anything, but let's say you had to choose. What would you prefer? Would you prefer they remake Blair Witch as found footage? Or would you prefer that they remake Blair Witch not found footage, opening up a little more tools in the toolbox, giving themselves a little more room to play and create maybe what could be a terrific, you know, psychological thriller horror? Like, I mean, imagine if Blair Witch turned out like really disturbing and eerie and creepy, like a Seven. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's what needs to be done, because if you just remake Blair Witch as found footage, which may be the case, because after all, that is the identity of the film and the identity of the franchise, really, you can't fool people anymore. You know, and you're likely to make something that's overproduced. You know, it's too polished. You know, the sound mixing and the sound design doesn't feel like that was one of the things that it was one of the issues I had with the 2016 film, is that the sound effects that were being used for the creature and, you know, all the shit that was going on didn't always sound like it was in the environment to where they were. Right? It sounded like it was professionally mixed, mastered, and produced. And it was great. Like, I mean, it was totally pro, very professional, no issues with the quality wasn't bad. I just was like, well, this feels a little overly produced, right? It feels a little too polished. You know, I should be hearing like it sounds like it's in the environment, which was what was so effective with the Blair Witch Project, right? And the fact that like at least 50% of the people that went to see it thought it was real. That was part of the mystique and part of the lore. You're not going to get that today. We're too desensitized. We as a film-going fandom community are too desensitized. It takes Terrifier. It takes the exploit, and I'm not knocking it, I'm just saying it takes a Terrifier to be so over the top and so grotesque and so bloody and gory, and I'm sure part 3 is going to be even more than 2, and that's their shtick, right? That's the gimmick, that's the hook, that's the shtick. That's why you go see the Terrifier films. You're not going because the stories are phenomenal. You're going to see how gross can we get this time. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that's the shtick of the Terrifier films, right? So there's no doubt that 3 is going to be even more grotesque and even more over the top than the third one. It's like the Fast and Furious movies. Part of the shtick eventually was how crazier can we get, right? And so, but it feels like it takes a Terrifier to create a buzz, like a real buzz on a level of like, you know, that kind of thing. Found footage movies are already against the 8 ball. Or behind the 8 ball, I should say, because most found footage movies are kind of like what some of those early 80s slasher films were, right? You know what I mean? Just these low budget, everybody's trying to cash on in, hoping to be the next Friday the 13th. I mean, you look at some of the early 80s slasher movies, you know, Splatter University and you know, and I mean, like, and Don't Go Into the Woods and I mean, real early 80s slasher, like, all those like independent ones you haven't heard of, you know, like just real raw, you know, like things like, you know, Attack of the Killer Munchkins and, you know, Killer Apples and, you know, like just low budget, never went to movie theaters, all that kind of stuff. Why did all these indie filmmakers, these amateur filmmakers, these home movie filmmakers, why did all these filmmakers decide to get in on the indie horror slasher craze in the early 80s? Because they were all hoping to be the next Friday the 13th. They were hoping to make something that they could sell to a distributor, that somebody would see, that somebody would pick up and release. And it rarely happened. Rarely happened. And that's what happened with found footage. Right? The Blair Witch Project comes out. It's a monumental success, one of the biggest, most successful horror film of all time, indie horror film of all time. And then now you did see a wave of found footage. And I like found footage. Let me just go on the record saying I like found footage. I do. And I still, believe it or not, I still think it hasn't hit its peak. I still think there is a found footage movie out there that could scare the shit out of us. But I don't know if it's going to come from Blumhouse and be a Blair Witch Project remake. You know? But that's why you saw all those found footage movies in the early to mid 2000s, because they were all hoping to be the next Blair Witch. And unfortunately now the mystique is gone. The curtain's been pulled back. So if the plan is to just do another, and again, I will eat my words. If Blumhouse releases a Blair Witch remake that is very good, I don't mean okay, I mean very good. Like, wow, that's fucking awesome. Then I'll eat my words. I'll eat my words. Or even not even awesome, just like, that was actually really good. I'll eat my words. In terms of found footage, because if that's the plan, if they want to just move in that direction to make another found footage movie with Blair Witch, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. As crazy as it sounds, taking Blair Witch out of found footage and into just a regular narrative film might be the best way to go. It gives you more tools to play with. It gives you more options, you know, in editing and in post. You don't have to worry about the production value being too polished or whatever. You know, I mean, there's options there. And maybe that's the best thing to do. But anyways, folks, yeah, those are my thoughts on it. I'll be watching very curiously, watching with curious eyes to see how this unfolds and what other horror films from the Lionsgate library they want to reboot. But I am extremely skeptical that it will have the impact they're hoping it will have just by the name alone, because the big reason why the original was so successful, and the mystique and aura that it created is extremely difficult to create today. Just by the sheer fact that we are all so desensitized, and it's of a gone era. It's of a gone era. It's gone. It's gone. So, you may need to reimagine the shit out of the Blair Witch. And then if you're reimagining it too much, then why even call it Blair Witch? Why do it? Right? It's like the Black Christmas 19 film. Why? Why call it Black? Well, I know why you're calling it Black Christmas, but you did yourself a disservice. And like I said, yes, it was a very woke movie for sure, but I'm a firm believer. If you have a message that if you have a story you want to tell, and you can find somebody to help produce that movie and pay for that film, you should be able to tell it. I don't care I don't care how woke it is. If you want to tell that movie, you should be able to tell that story. My issue is not with that. My issue is the fact that you were writing an IP just because you were writing it had nothing to do with anything. And you're doing yourself a disservice, because people go in with an expectation, this is going to be Black Christmas, and it's not. And, what the hell is this? They should have just called it Slay Girls and just leaned into it. That's what they should have done. They did themselves a disservice. So anyway, I digress. But yeah, those are my thoughts, folks, on Blumhouse acquiring the Blair Witch Project and other rights to reboot the franchise. If you're watching after the fact or live, jump into the comment section and let me know your thoughts on what I had here, what I had to say here today. Do you agree? Do you disagree? All that kind of fun stuff. And let me know your thoughts. All right, let's jump over to the chat room and see what all you are saying. Some super chats did come in. Let me grab those. And I do know that a couple member chats did as well. VO sends in $10. Hey man, says, hey Dave, how would you feel about Alexander Aja directing a Friday the 13th reboot? Aja talked about it before, and as an avid fan of High Tension, he'd be my ideal preference for the franchise. I'd be open to that. Yeah, I'd be open to that. Yeah, sure, why not? At this rate, why not? I'd be open to it. Josh McKenna sends in $9.99. Thank you, Josh, and says, I finally watched Exorcist Believer this weekend. This is a very unpopular opinion, but I actually enjoyed watching it. I'm not embarrassed to say it that I didn't hate it as much as everyone else did. I didn't either. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it as much as everybody else did. Power Packers 90 sends in a member chat. Thank you, buddy. Says, the Scooby-Doo Blair Witch parody was actually scary as a kid in the 90s. I've never seen it. I'll have to look that up. Brandon Collins sends in $5, says the only film that was even successful was the original. Both sequels failed. The video game failed. Why reboot something bound for failure? Bonkers. I could not agree more. Darren of the Slaughtered Lamb Movie Podcast said this the other day, and I absolutely agree with him, and I know others have said it too. They should, and of course there's a business reason why they don't, but they should really reboot movies that have failed. Right? The Blair Witch Project was a monumental success, so why reboot that? Well, they rebooted it because it was a success. So they feel that there is money to be made there because people loved it. Generally speaking, Hollywood does not remake, bad movies or movies that have failed because they feel that, well, if it failed once, it's going to fail again, so why put money into it? But in a lot of cases, movies fail for a variety of reasons. The marketing was terrible. Maybe it was before its time. Maybe it was past its time. Maybe it wasn't hip at that time, but now it's it. Maybe it wasn't relative, but now it's relative. There's so many things. I agree. I would like to see some failed films get the remake or reboot treatment. Not So Furious sends in $4.99. Thank you, buddy. Says, I can vouch for everything you're saying. I was 14 in 99, and I thought the movie was 100% real because of the website. There you go. There you go. Not So Furious can back me up on that. It was incredible. It was incredible. It was, like, again, if you were not around at that time or old enough, being 14 at that time, you were definitely old enough. But I'm saying, like, if you were 3 or 4 or 5, right? But yeah, if you were a teenager, I was 20, you were 14. The mystique that surrounded that was huge. It was a very different time in the world. And the internet, like I said, again, it's not that it was in comparison to where we are today. It was archaic. I think I was still on dial-up, as a lot of people were. And so, you just hope that nobody picked up the phone while you were on the internet. Very different. And so it was very easy to fool people marketing a movie, especially like this, that was real. You know, and they had like the missing persons posters and this, and come watch this documentary in the movie theater. Their footage was found and it's crazy what happened. And it was huge. You can't do that today. You can't market a film like that today. And so if that's the plan, that's basically what I'm trying to say. If that is the plan, that they're reimagining Blair Witch, but just as a modern version of that film, and it's going to be, and they're going to market it as if it's real, like, get the fuck out of here. It's a waste of time. Why are you doing that? Nobody know. We know it's not real. So that's why I say maybe the best option is to just reimagine it as a quote unquote regular film, not a found footage film, a regular narrative piece, regular live action narrative piece. And maybe that's the best way to go, and give yourselves an opportunity to craft a real awesome psychological thriller remake. And then you have both. You have the best of both worlds, potentially the best of both worlds. You have the found footage original and you have the live action remake, right? Not that that's not live action, but you know what I mean, right? Non-documentary live action narrative, you have both. Maybe that's the best way to do it. And if you craft a really good psychological horror thriller, I'm just saying, listen, winning solves everything. You make a movie that's really good. And of course, you could apply that to found footage as well. Hey, if they remake Blair Witch, it's found footage and it's amazing, all power to them. All power to them. The Violator 862 sends in $4.99. Thank you. Says, I know I'm probably not the only one to say this, but I have absolutely no faith in this project. It's probably going to be a bland and jump scare focused. Maybe, although when you're shooting found footage, jump scares, you can have jump scares in found footage, but you got to be very careful. Again, that goes to my argument, right, of not wanting to be so, overly produced, so I don't even know if there was a jump scare in the original Blair Witch Project. I'm not entirely sure. But we just don't want to be overly produced, right? That's the idea. Carl Weidman sends in $5. Thank you, Carl. Says, I'd like to see a reboot of the Blair Witch Project with a narrative story. There you go. Lots of mood and atmosphere. I could not agree more. Why not do it? And maybe that is what they're going to do, right? We have no idea if that's what they're going to do, but maybe that is what they're going to do. And I guarantee you that if that is what they're going to do, as soon as that information comes down the pipe, you're going to have a lot of people saying, the Blair Witch Project is a found footage movie. You're going to have people like, what? You can't play that. And I'm going to be first to say, maybe this is a good idea. Maybe it is, because then you don't draw comparisons. I mean, you can draw comparisons if you want. I like the original better than the remake. That's fine. But narratively speaking, they're very different. One is found footage as if it's real, and one is a regular, quote unquote, live action narrative movie. And like I said, maybe that is the best way to go, and maybe my expectations, or maybe me suggesting that they could dish out like a quality film like Seven, maybe that's a little bit of a high expectation, but you get the point I'm making, right? Like if they deliver something that is really disturbing, you know what I'm saying? And maybe it is about a detective who's investigating, the Blair Witch murders and, whatever the case is, but it's dark and ominous and mood and atmospheric and great performances and a great lead actor. And do you know what I'm saying? Like if you deliver something that's really great and we're invested in the story and it's like, wow, maybe that's the best way to go. And then there's no, you're not drawing any comparisons, right? And, but is that the plan? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I have no idea. All right. Is that all the super chats? Let me just make sure. I think it is. Yeah. Carl Wyman was the last one. Just want to make sure. I just want to make sure that it's the last one. Hang on. I'm just closing some of these things down here. I always got a lot of tabs open because I'm always doing so much. Kiss my Flapjack, my man. Flapjack says, I love the original Blair Witch. I love the original Blair Witch. That last 2 or 3 minutes is probably the most scared I've ever been in a movie theater. There you go. There you go. And yeah, and again, like I said, at that time, even if you didn't, here's the thing, even if you knew it wasn't, it wasn't real, right? At that time, going to a movie theater to watch a found footage movie was not a common thing. So again, the Blair Witch Project is really a product of its time, a product of that era, a product of the naivety of this new thing called the internet. I believe it was one of the first movies to ever be marketed online. I don't know if it was the first, but it was one of the first. And you know, like it's just it's a bygone era. It's gone. And like now, found footage is so, again, for better or worse, there's good found footage movies, there's not so good found footage movies. For better or worse, there's just so many, there's just so many found footage movies, and we're desensitized to the medium, we're desensitized to the product, we're desensitized to the execution. So, I don't know. We'll see. Eddie Chase sends in $2, says, Blair Witch remake? Yikes. Overhyped drivel, says Eddie. Overhyped drivel. We'll see, Eddie. We'll see. I have to go back and watch the beginning of the stream and get my thoughts. Aaron Click says, what if they go meta and make a black and white movie about things going wrong with the making of the new Blair Witch film? Like something supernatural is happening in the cast and the crew, to the cast and the crew. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how people would feel about that, but that's definitely an option, right? That's definitely an option. Interesting. Indeed. Davey Deathray says, just go back to the 1600s. Let's see the origin. This is one of the rare cases where I wouldn't mind a prequel, actually. Well, that's definitely an option they could do. Yeah, they could go back to the 1600s. They could tell sort of the prequel. I'm not a huge fan of prequels, generally speaking. I always like to go forward rather than back. That could be because, I think one of the reasons why is because usually when you watch the first installment of a movie, in the narrative, there's something that you come to know about a character's backstory or, you know, whatever the case is. And I usually find that, especially if it's a horror film, you know, there's a lot of mystique and unknown that is created in a first installment of a movie about a character's backstory or whatever the case is. And I always like to live and revel in that mystique. I'm always tricky about going back and just seeing everything explained to me. I get what you're saying. Narratively, yes, there's enough there to go back and do that, for sure. But generally speaking, I like to keep I like to keep narratives moving forward. Lost Boys Bios sends in $2, says, shocking. I love First Omen, slow burn, and pure horror. Yes, I've yet to see the First Omen, but I do want to see it. I did see Late Night with the Devil last week and really enjoyed that film. I thought it was really good. A bit different than what I expected it to be, but I quite enjoyed it. I thought the performance was really good. Set deck was really good. I thought they did a really good job with it. So I had fun with that one for sure. Chester Franklin Jr. says, Dave, I'm not much into the Blair Witch movies. Hope you're well, man. No problem, Chester. We don't always have to be into the same things. I hope you are well too. DJJD says, just finished watching you discuss your horror movies you wouldn't watch again with TSL. Well, there you go. You get a double Dave right there. Double dose of Dave. That's the way to do it. VO Tripper, like entrepreneur. $10. Could a horror film set in the wilderness with the intensity of something like High Tension could work? Oh, sure. Yeah. Look, I mean, when it comes to low budget horror movies, whether that's low budget, like, you know, It's Me, Billy, or whether that's low budget like what Blumhouse does, right? Which is in like the, you know, $5 to $10 million range. We were, between the two movies for us, Billy 1 and 2, were about $230,000. So both low budget, one more lower budget than the other. But listen, it doesn't matter if you're Billy or Blumhouse. this principle is the same. When it comes to low-budget horror movies, location, location, location. It's like real estate, right? Location, location, location. And location matters. And so, yes, absolutely. I mean, any horror movie that's set in the woods, you immediately set a horror movie in the woods, you immediately do a number of things. It can be a creepy location, right? There's vulnerability. You've introduced vulnerability. You've introduced isolation, right? Now, you can also make a really crappy horror movie in the woods as well, but you've given yourself the tools to help give you a probability of success in crafting a story that's scary and atmospheric and moody and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, absolutely. It could, you never know. Descartes Guru 86 says, Dave, brother, have any plans to see Godzilla X Kong? Not in the theater. I thought it was a pretty good popcorn movie. The fights were pretty awesome. No, I'll catch it when it comes to streaming. I gotta be honest. And I sound like a curmudgeon when I say this, and I know I sound like a party pooper, but I just have lost interest in the Monsterverse, and it's not personal. You know, yes, they are fun popcorn fart movies. You can turn your brain off. I get that. But it's becoming a little too, like, there's a limit to me. Like, there's a threshold. And when I watch, like, my favorite of it's always been my favorite. You see more people now jumping onto the train, but my favorite of the Monsterverse is Godzilla King of the Monsters from 2019. And it got shit on when it came out. I still think it's the best of the Monsterverse. I like it better than the 2014 Godzilla, although the 2014 Godzilla may be next in line for me. I wasn't a fan of Kong Skull Island, really. Great visuals, though. Godzilla versus Kong was fun. But to me now, it's just becoming, the believability is just out the window. And I know you could say, well, listen, you know, it's Godzilla x Kong. It's not supposed to be. But the tone of the films have changed. Like when you watch the Godzilla, for better or worse, I know people are like, oh, but they just isn't getting good. They'd cut away. And I get all that. But let's put all that aside. The tone of that first Godzilla movie, there was a seriousness to it. There was a gritty realism to that first movie. It's hard to believe that Godzilla x Kong even lives in the same universe as the 2014 film. Godzilla x Kong, and I haven't seen it, but I know people have seen it. I've seen the trailers. It looks like a PS5 video game. It just looks like candy junk. It just like, you got Kong with like the gauntlet. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, to me, it's too much. To me, I feel like I'm watching like the 1963 or whatever it was, Toho Godzilla versus Kong, like the cheesy, it just looks ridiculous to me. You know, it's too much. It's too rich. Like, you know, like there's some pieces of cake that are good. It's cake. That's not supposed to be taken seriously. It's not good for you. It's not going to change the world. It's just birthday cake. Yeah, it's birthday cake. And that's what Godzilla King of the Monsters was. It's birthday cake. It was a nice balance of the two. But then Godzilla x Kong is like this really rich, overly stuffed, way too sugary cake. And I'm just like, well, yeah, it's good. I mean, yes, it's good because it's sugar, but fuck. What's wrong, Dave? Well, it's just so much. It's too much. Like, the birthday cake was good. This is just like, fuck. Ugh. Do you want another piece? No. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of how I feel. It's too sugary. It's too over the top. It's too cheesy. It's too silly. And you can say, well, you haven't seen the movie yet. I don't have to see it to know it. I can tell by the trailers. People told me, oh, it's like Godzilla versus Kong, but like even more. I'm like, well, yeah. And I thought Godzilla versus Kong was like wild and ridiculous and silly. So if it's even more, well, of course, it's just, like, I don't, and I know what people are thinking, but Dave, it's not, I know, but they changed the tone on me. If Godzilla 2014 had the same tone as Godzilla x Kong, great. But you deliver this, and like I said, despite what, you know, the issues we have with that movie, you deliver like this movie that's like kind of taking itself seriously, and then the tone changes when you get to, now it's like a video game, silly, dumb kids movie. Like, I don't get it. I don't. So I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. And I would much prefer my screens keep turning off. I wonder if I have a loose cable. Anyways, will I check it out? Of course I'll check it out, but I'll wait for streaming. I'm a Godzilla fan. Will I watch it and walk away and be like, yeah, that was fun. That was just turn your brain up. Of course. Yes, of course. But it's just not where I was hoping the Monsterverse would go. I think King of the Monsters is a nice balance between silly and serious, if you know what I mean. It's a nice balance. It's a nice balance. But that's me. That's me. BB Haunted Basement sends in a member chat. Thanks, buddy. Been a member for 1 month. Really appreciate that. Says, I love the franchise, but not a fan of Blumhouse. However, I really want a new Blair Witch movie, so I'll just wish for the best. Well, there you go. There you go. Hey, listen, there's a lot of people that really like the franchise. There's a lot of people that don't like the franchise. So I'm rooting for you, man. I'm rooting for you. Let's hope it works. Let's hope it works. It'll be, I mean, as soon as we know the direction they're going in, whether it's going to be another found footage or, live action, that'll tell us a lot. And that'll be interesting and fun to speculate on. Davey Deathray says, yeah, the Monsterverse is cool for kids and stuff, and it's fine that it exists, but not my thing. Yeah, and it's disappointing to me that it's gone that way. And I guess maybe it's just a byproduct of the material, because how long can you, well, no, I disagree. But it feels like the idea is just to go bigger, badder. Hopefully it's better just to be big. Like the bigger you go. And the thing too, is that you begin to lose scale, right? Like you begin to, like, having King Kong riding Godzilla. It's just fucking ridiculous to me. Like, it's just like you lose, like having them stand on an aircraft carrier was like really at my limit, because those two Titans would have sunk that ship. They would not have been able to stand on it. And this is what I mean by, like, the perspective of scale, you're beginning to lose it, and as I've said before, and I'll say it again, the best example of the seriousness I'm talking about, I've said it before, I'll say it again, watch the Comic-Con Godzilla trailer from 2014. Just YouTube, after the show today, Godzilla Comic-Con trailer 2014. Don't put in teaser trailer, because that'll be a different thing. Godzilla Comic-Con teaser trailer. Watch that. The seriousness and the tone of that trailer was fucking epic. That's what I'm talking about. Then after you're done that, go watch the Kong X Godzilla trailer. And you'll be like, what the fuck happened? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's totally different. Totally different. And I'm just disappointed in that. I'm just disappointed. That's all. It's different strokes for different folks. All right, let's see here. Let's get some super chats here. I know, hang on a sec. I think another one came in. Did another one come in? Oh, hang on. Let me go back. Maybe I thought I saw, oh, there we go. Yes. Josh McKenna. Thank you, Josh. Sends in $9.99. Sorry, Josh, I'd missed this one. Says, I vaguely remember you talking about this, but what are your favorite childhood TV shows? I remember you said Alf was one of your favorites. Did you have other favorites? Oh, I did. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Alf was one of my big favorite TV shows in the 80s for sure. I was a huge Alf fan. I liked Three's Company a little bit before my time. Well, I mean, is before my time, because obviously when it went off the air, I was only 5, but because I had older siblings, but it's mostly regarded as a 70s sitcom, even though more seasons aired in the 80s. It went from 77 to 84, but I'm a big Three's Company fan. As a kid, like Today's Special, He-Man, right? He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. I was huge on that. Had all the toys, Castle Grayskull, Snake Mountain, He-Man, Skeletor. Was huge into He-Man. I did watch G.I. Joe from time to time, but I was really into the toys. Had like the G.I. Joe toys and the base and all that. Ninja Turtles, was really into the Ninja Turtles, the 80s cartoon from 87. Really into that. Loved Ninja Turtles, had all the toys and all that kind of stuff. So those are some of the kids, like the kitty kid shows that I was into. But like, yeah, Alf, sitcom Alf, Three's Company. I really like The Cosby Show. You know, Growing Pains, Who's the Boss? I mean, all the classics from that era that I grew up with as a young boy. You name a classic sitcom from that era, Punky Brewster, you know, Mr. Belvedere. I mean, that's my era as a little boy. So, so I would watch a lot of those shows, for sure. Those are some. Saved by the Bell. I was a big Saved by the Bell fan. When I wake up in the morning. Yes, I got your super chat, Josh. Thank you for letting me know. Really appreciate that. Let's see here. What are we at? We're at an hour and 16 minutes. All right. VO Tripper sends another $5. Thanks, buddy. Really appreciate that. Says, what advice could you give for writing a slasher film script? What generally works and what generally doesn't work in the genre? Oh, look, I mean, at the end of the day, writing a script is very difficult. You have to be, I can't tell you or anybody what to write. So you have to be first and foremost passionate about the material, passionate about the story you want to tell. If you're not passionate about it, if you don't believe in it, how can you expect us to believe in it? So that's the first thing. You have to really believe in the material, really believe in the project. And then just be true to the material. And because what is true to you is what's most important. You know, I mean, for me, what makes a great slasher is, mood, atmosphere, ambiguity, not knowing much about the killer, a great mask, all that kind of stuff, right? But that may not be what makes a great slasher for you or for anybody else. So first and foremost, just whatever you are passionate about, whatever you think excites you about a slasher film is what you should write about. That's how I'll answer it. But are there general things that are always going to resonate with an audience? Yeah, mood, atmosphere, I would say less is more, but it depends, all right? If you're doing a slasher movie, then people expect slashing. So, it depends, right? Depends. Inventive kills, right? Make sure maybe, try to come up with kills that have never been done before, have never been seen before, kills that make people go, whoa, you know what I mean? It's good stuff there too. All right, did I get all the, let me just go back. I just want to make sure I'm getting all the super chats. Okay, I did. Did I? I got that one. Oh, wait. Oh, yes, that was a member chat. That was a member chat, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, let me scroll here. Let me see. Let me see. Brandon Collins says, you have to just sit down and write it no matter how shitty it is. Just get that first draft out and you can rewrite. So many people never finish a script because they tried to make it perfect. That's great advice too. Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah. Just sit down, write your first draft. Generally speaking, scripts are anywhere between 90 to 120 pages. A slasher script is probably going to be more on the 80 to 90 page side. But if your first draft is 150 pages, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just get everything down. Get all your ideas down, all the information down. And then once it's all down, that's when you can go back in and start working on a second draft and start fine tuning and all that kind of stuff, right? And then, shaving off and tightening up where you need to be. But Brandon's right. If you're too worried about being perfect on your first draft, then you're probably going to get frustrated. You're going to hit writer's block. You're going to get frustrated with yourself, think you're no good, throw up your hands, kick your puppy. You know what I mean? And then you never come back to it. So yeah, just get everything down. I mean, the first draft of Port Robinson Road, the feature that's been in development for 20 years, the first draft I ever wrote, this is not hyperbole, the first draft I ever wrote of Port Robinson Road was 161 pages. And it was 2005. I was 26 years old. I was only 5 years removed, or 4 years removed from the events that I was writing about. And I was fairly new to the entertainment industry at that time. I had just, I'd only been in the business for 4 years. And so there was still a lot of things I was learning. I knew how to write a script, obviously. I'd been to film school, and so I knew the structure, and I knew, all that kind of stuff. And I knew that's why my script ended up being 161 pages, was because I knew that I just need to get everything down. But it was 161 pages. And because I got everything down, even stuff that's like, yeah, that's probably not going to translate well to film. Do you know what I mean? Because there's reasons why, when scripts are adapted for movies, whether it's from a book or an idea, there are certain things that are noodled and massaged, that are changed, that are left out. Because there are things that just work better cinematically. There are things that just work better on the screen, and things that work better on a page, reading in a book and imagining it, in your own mind. Sometimes it's for budget. Sometimes it's just for creatively. So yeah, get everything down. Now the Port Robinson Road script, I think, is about 113 pages, maybe something like that. It probably could still be tightened a little bit, although because I've started to go through it again, and so it could tighten up even a little bit more, but I'm happy to where it is now, like at that page length. You know what I mean? Because it probably will be. I could see it, if I get a chance to make it the way I want to make it, I could see it being a movie that's like, an hour and 40 minutes or, or something like that, right? Maybe 2 hours, maybe. But, but yeah, that's what you need to do. Just get it all down and then start going. I mean, screenplays go through many drafts. I'm sure part of, Kubrick was notorious of having lengthy scripts, or at least a few of them were pretty long. All right, let's see here. K-Rock the Phantom says, I think Blair Witch would be best done by A24. You're probably right. Blumhouse is getting tired. A24 seems to bring out the really inventive ideas regardless of the genre they do. Yeah, you're not wrong in that thinking, and there's reasons for that. Look, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Blumhouse, speaking at it as objectively as I possibly can, Blumhouse is incredible at what they do. They are one of the leaders they are the leader in horror right now. They are. No production company in horror right now is making more horror movies than them in Hollywood, as far as I know. At least certainly in the budget. They are the leaders in their space. Low budget horror movies that make tons of money. Like the article said, their movies have made over $6 billion with a B, $1 billion at the box office. They are the leaders. They are horror. They are synonymous with horror. And they do an incredible job at making low budget horror movies that make huge profits. Some are really good. Some are not so good. But that is the reality that anybody will face the more you churn out. The more you churn out, the more likely there is for duds or for ones that are, it's okay. But you also will churn out really good ones, right? And when you look at Blumhouse's catalog, you can go through it and be like, yeah, that was pretty good. No, that's not good. That's not good. Oh, no, that was really good. Oh, that was really good. Oh, no, that was a really good one. I don't like that one. Like, it's pretty, it seems like Blumhouse is dishing out turd after 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 turd, because we tend to focus and, especially the online fandom space tends to focus and hone in on turds more than they do the things they love, because it gets clicks and views and likes and subscribers. And so Blumhouse dishes out really good horror movies too. But they do dish out a lot of duds because they're churning out so many. Blumhouse's thing, though, to your point, and I tend to agree with you, K-Rock, because Blumhouse has established themselves, not that they couldn't do something that was really mature and grounded, but they've established themselves as they tend to, you look at sort of, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you look at the pattern of the movies they get behind and they produce. They want to produce mainstream, populous horror movies that will appeal, generally speaking, to a general movie-going audience, right? Populous horror movies that appeal to pretty much everybody. That doesn't mean everybody's going to like it. I just mean that they're appealing to the general movie-going audience. They're mainstream horror movies. Some are really good, some are not so good, you know what I mean? And that's sort of kind of what they do. So it doesn't surprise me that they've gotten behind Blair Witch. It's a mainstream horror movie that appeals to a lot of people. You know what I'm saying? They're not remaking like some obscure art house film. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's just not what Blumhouse does. That's why they did Halloween. That's why they did The Exorcist. That's why Blum would love to get the rights to Friday the 13th. Because that's what he does, for better or worse. And he's really good at it. He's really good at it. He's a fantastic producer. A24, on the other hand, although they are starting to dish out a little more mainstream stuff, they sprung onto the scene being that, avant-garde, more highbrow production company, right? More of the grittier, darker, more arty kind of horror films, right? And so I agree. I think that maybe Blair Witch would settle with them or would settle in with them nicely. I also think, I don't think it'll happen because, and I don't even know if they would have the interest, but I also think I would be really curious to see Elm Street with A24 just because of the subject matter, right? Elm Street with Blumhouse, you know what I'm saying? That doesn't mean it wouldn't be good. It does not mean that, right? But I would be curious to see what A24 would do with that, just because of the more psychological, darker, more, kind of approach to what they tend to do. It would be interesting. So I tend to agree with you. I think that would have been interesting. But they want to make boatloads of money, and Blumhouse is synonymous with horror, and they have already a distribution deal in place with Universal. And I mean, they're the top of the food chain right now, And listen, if Blumhouse are like, Dave, we'd love you to direct a movie. What I'm going to say no? No. Why not? Well, because, you turn out some turds and there's this thing in the community right now. It's like, Blumhouse and a blub dud. No! I'm going to say, yeah. Right? You know what I'm saying? And anybody would. Because, yes, they do turn out some duds, but they also turn out some pretty good ones. And that's just the reality of the machine that they are. The machine that they are. So, but I tend to agree with you. Cody Leach, my man, Cody Leach. Lodi Keach. What? No, wait. Cody Leach. Lodi Keach. What's that? Cody Leach, what's going on? Great to see you here, buddy. Says, Blumhouse used to be a nice mix of great movies and bad movies. The past 2 years, their track record has gone to shit. Now their name gets attached to something, and I don't get excited at all. Blum is trying to collect major horror franchises like Infinity Stones. Well, it is true. It is true. The last couple years, they've churned out some films that have sort of not been overly terrific. Of course, you have Megan, which did well at the box office, and generally speaking, did well with fans. But you look at their entire catalog. And their entire catalog is full of movies that are, it's kind of like I actually haven't done the math because obviously it's subjective, right? But looking at just at a glance, it looks like it's some good movies, some bad movies. Oh, that was pretty good. Oh, that was pretty bad. That was pretty bad. Oh, that one was pretty bad. Oh, wait, but that was pretty good. Oh, that was pretty good too. Hey, that one was not bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, you look at their entire catalog and they've done some really good stuff. It does feel like over the last couple years, they've turned out some duds like Night Swim and, Exorcist Believer but then at the same time they've got Megan and they've got Five Nights at Freddy's and in terms of financially, those movies did very well. So it's tricky. Is Blair Witch right for Blumhouse? I don't know. I don't know how long you've been in the chat, Cody, but at the beginning, I was talking about how, it really depends on the direction they're going to go. It doesn't excite me if they're just going to do a found footage film. It doesn't really, that doesn't mean it can't be great, but it doesn't really excite me. And maybe the best option is to suddenly turn it from found footage, remake it as a live action narrative piece and really do your best to dish out a terrific psychological horror thriller. Maybe that's the best way to go. And because then you're not comparing the two, or it's harder to compare the two because they're two different types of films. I mean, basically almost two different subgenres. And, because the era of that kind of stuff, the mystique of the Blair Witch Project and what made the Blair Witch Project so successful and so great, we were talking about this at the beginning of the show, is an era gone by. I mean, it's just, I remember when that movie came out and 50% of the people that were going to see it were, thought it was real. And watching a found footage movie in the movie theater at that time was virtually non-existent. And so the mystique and the aura and around that film at a time when the internet and the marketing online was in its infancy and all that kind of stuff was so powerful. And the naivety, of people who were online and, oh my God, it's real. Holy shit, fucking shit. And it was incredible. Now, I just don't think that same marketing a Blair Witch remake in the same way is going to pack any kind of punch like that. I just don't think it's so maybe changing it up a little bit in its approach and its execution might be the best thing to do. I don't know. IDT Kennel says, I also just think Blum doesn't do big name reboots very well. They miss the mark a lot on the aspect, in my opinion. Well, it could be part of that, but also the expectations are a lot higher too. There's more at stake. If The Exorcist Believer was not called Exorcist Believer, and again, by the way, I am on record as to saying that, I don't think Exorcist Believer is nearly as bad as everybody seems to think it is. I don't think it's a dumpster fire that people think it is. That being said, it's certainly not what it could and should have been. I will agree with that. And, but if Exorcist Believer was called, I don't know, call it Possession Girl or something like that, and it had nothing to do with the original Exorcist, there was no Reagan, there was no, Chris McNeil, it would have been like, well, it was fine. It was serviceable. It was fine. It's cool. It's kind of creepy. You know what I'm saying? But the second you add a iconic IP to it, the expectation goes through the roof. So it is always going to be a mark that is extremely difficult to achieve. Extremely difficult to achieve. No matter who's doing it. No matter who's doing it, right? Because the expectations are so high. So yeah, I know what you mean. Cody Leach says, if they get the rights to Elm Street, you'll hear me breaking drywall all the way in Canada. Hey, listen, there's many times I hear you from here anyway. Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I'm really hope they don't get, well, between the two, here's the thing. Again, speaking about it as objectively as I possibly can, between the two franchises, Friday and Elm Street, I think, again, speaking about it as objectively as I can, looking at what Blumhouse does, would Friday be a better fit than Elm Street? Yes. I do. That doesn't mean that they would do a great job, but it means I think they could. Elm Street, I want to me, Elm Street's got to be dark as fuck, psychological horror thriller. K-Rock in the chat thought maybe A24, right? Maybe A24 for Elm Street. That would, if it was announced that A24 was doing Elm Street, that would get me excited. That doesn't mean they're going to do a good job, but it would get me excited about it. I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Blumhouse, Jason, if you're watching, he's not watching. But if he is, he's not watching. But if he ever does, he'll never watch. But hey, on the off chance, get your greedy little fingers off you don't need everything. You don't need everything. You don't need to monopolize the big three. Competition is good. Variety is the spice of movies. God damn it. God damn it. Jordan Moran says, I can't get the concept of loaded quiche out of my head. Wait, as Blumhouse movie or as a meal tonight? Well, maybe a bit both. Maybe a bit of both. Evil Alex says, Halloween 2018 was success, both critics and fans and box office, the trilogy in general. Generally speaking, I would agree with you. Yeah, well, no, I mean, look, the Halloween trilogy was a huge success. Huge success. Grossed $500 million at the worldwide box office. Now, like I always like to remind people, they don't take home that money. So it's like your salary, right? You know, there's your gross and then there's your net. And sometimes you look at your gross and you're like, yay! And then you look at your net and you're like, oh. You know what I mean? Sometimes that can happen. Of course, the more you make, the more you're taxed. But yes, the original, the Halloween, the David Gordon Green and Blumhouse Halloween trilogy grossed $500 million, $500 million between the three films at the worldwide box office. But of course, you know, there's taxes, there's interest, there's overhead, there's the money that goes to the studios and the money that goes to the exhibitors, and you know, there's a number of factors, and it whittles all the way. But they still made a healthy profit, and a very healthy profit, and everybody got paid, and everybody was very happy. And so despite what you think of Halloween Kills or Halloween Ends, financially, those three movies were gigantic successes. And then you look at, of course, streaming and Blu-ray and digital sales. And I mean, the David Gordon Green Halloween trilogy, regardless of whether you like them or not, was a gigantic, monumental success. Even Halloween Ends. Halloween Ends made over $100 million at the worldwide box office, folks. Now, every film made less, which is generally usually the case, although there are examples of sequels making more. But in the slasher subgenre, generally speaking, sequels make less. So that's not a surprise. And each film was, you know, although I think, was Halloween Ends better critically reviewed than Kills? I can't remember. I have to double check. But listen, Blumhouse is the leader right now in making mainstream populist horror movies that appeal to a general movie-going audience that make money. And that doesn't mean every one they turn out is good. There's a lot they turn out that isn't so good. There's some they turn out that are pretty good. But they're the leaders of it, and they do it very well. But I agree, it doesn't particularly excite me if they were to get all three, Friday, Elm Street, and Halloween. I'd be like, what the hell is... Because there is you know, the more movies you make, the more that you create sort of an identity in terms of aesthetic and look and feel to your films. And you know, you got to be careful that, of course, it does depend how much creative control they give to their directors and things like that, and how much they can make it their own and stuff. But I'd be more excited if Elm Street went to A24, to be honest with you. Okay, I'll go another 5 minutes here. Another 5 minutes, and then I have to, another 5 minutes, take this thing to 2 o'clock, and then I have to skedaddle. Let me see here. Cody Leach follows up and says, I don't think the OG Blair Witch even holds up. So anyone rebooting Blair Witch has got a hell of a task on their hands. Yeah, I think I tend to agree with you in a lot of ways. And again, as I said at the beginning of the show, I think a lot of the success of Blair Witch comes from its, well, like I said, it's the naivety of the world at that time. The fact that 50 to 60% of the people thought it was real. The marketing was genius. The aura, the mystique, like, the weight of that movie was brilliant. It was brilliant. And because it's 2024 and that is an era long gone, I mean, do you know what I mean? It's got, well, where are we going to, it's not impossible, but as you said, it's improbable. And so, like I said, I think maybe the best thing to do is to change it to a live action narrative film. Remove it from the found footage subgenre and just put it into a psychological thriller subgenre and make it a really disturbing film. Maybe it's about a detective who's investigating the Blair Witch, or I don't know, whatever. But if it's really good and it's dark and it's ominous and it's disturbing, hey, I mean, who knows, right? Who knows? But if it's just going to be a reimagining of the found footage, I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. Ryan Oshlow says, do you happen to find that the marketing to movies nowadays regarding the movie posters aspect are similar to each other? Yes or no, and why? Similar to each other in what way? Like, I'm not sure. I'd have to take a look at some horror movie posters. I mean, obviously there's the classic floating heads poster, which was a very common thing in the 90s and the 2000s. I'd have to take a look and sort of dive into what specifically you're talking about. Nothing has dawned on me, nothing obvious anyway. I'll say that. Not that I can think of. Okay, have I got all the super chats, folks? Let me just jump over to the other screen here. I just want to make sure. The last super chat was VO Tripper. Yes, I have. Okay. I'm just making sure, ladies and germs, that I have not missed any of you fine human beings. Chester Franklin Jr. says, Dave, when you was on the TSL, was it a mistake from Darren when he accidentally put the IMDb chapter 1? No, it was real. It was real. No. It was a joke. Yeah, it was a joke, Chester. All is good. It was a joke. Frank Riker says, hey, Frank, my man Frank sends in $2. Thanks, Frank. Says, to the sexy MFers in the chat. Thank you, Frank Riker. Haven't had one of those parting super chats from you in a while. Always good to see that. Let me see here. I just want to get a couple more I haven't gotten yet. Tyler Adams says, who thinks you should spoil a twist mystery box that exists in the book when covering the news for a first film adaptation? 2 of the 3 people I get movie news from spoiled the last Ronin reveal. Well, I think, listen, if you have a following, if you have a responsibility because you have a following and you're talking about something that is not out there in the zeitgeist or not out there known, but I think putting up a spoiler warning or just mentioning, hey, I'm going to talk about spoilers now, it is what it is. I think that's fair. But at the end of the day, there's only so much that a content creator can do to curb spoilers. There's one thing when you are intentionally spoiling something and it's malicious and you know what I mean? But it's another thing when it's just part of the natural conversation. And it's very difficult for me to have a conversation, talk about this topic, unless I talk about the spoilers. So we're going to talk about the spoilers. And, at the end of the day, the responsibility, there's only so much they can do. And the responsibility does bear on the viewer. If they're talking about something that could be potentially spoilery, maybe I shouldn't, watch it until I've seen said movie or read said book or know about, whatever the case is, right? But I think giving a little bit of a spoiler warning, I think, is okay. There's only so much you can do. All right, let me see here. 1 minute to go, folks. 1 minute to go. Devin says, Jason Blum is a false prophet of the horror genre. On the surface, it seems he's repopularizing the genre and characterizing in films we love. In actuality, he's only producing shit for dollars. Well, but let's keep in mind, folks, that there are Blumhouse movies that he's produced that people really do like. I mean, Sinister is one of the great horror movies of the last 20 years. The first Insidious film, one of the great horror movies of the last 20 years. I mean, again, because online hatred and drama and spew and garbage tends to sell and get clicks and likes, we tend to focus on the misses more than we do the hits. It's sort of the opposite of going to a psychic. You tend to focus on the hits and not so much the misses. And it's not that Blumhouse hasn't had duds. They've had duds. They've had some duds, for sure. But if you look at some of the movies they've produced, they've also produced some pretty good ones too. And so, but when they are remaking reboots, when they are remaking films from your childhood and you have an emotional, nostalgic attachment to it, then the stakes are higher. The expectations are higher, right? There was no expectations with Insidious or Sinister, which is why we tend to forget about them, that they're fucking amazing. And we forget, oh yeah, that was Blumhouse. Holy shit. You know what I'm saying? Because we didn't have an emotional, nostalgic attachment to them when we first went and saw them. But The Exorcist, Halloween, Blair Witch, all of a sudden we're like, fuck, because we're attached to it, right? And rightly so. Rightly so. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that that's sort of the kind of the mindset. So yeah, do yourself a favor and look up a list of Blumhouse films. And again, obviously it's subjective. Maybe you just hate every Blumhouse movie that comes out. Maybe you thought Insidious was a piece of shit. Maybe you thought Sinister is the biggest pile of crap of all time. I mean, obviously it's subjective, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, most horror fans would go through the Blumhouse list and go, oh yeah, no, they've done some pretty epic ones too, but to Cody's point when he was in here, yes, over the last couple years, they've seemed to put out a few more stinkers than usual. But why is that? Is it because they're shitty at making horror movies? No, they're the best in the business at making horror movies, mainstream populist horror movies, right? They're the best at doing it at the moment. It's because they're churning out more and more. And so the more you churn out, the more duds there's going to be. It's just simple math, right? It's simple math. The more horror movies that A24 turns out, if A24 began to turn out as many horror movies as Blumhouse, you would see quite a few duds from A24. You'd go, no, because A24 is suddenly just churning out all these horror movies, right? So it's just math. It's just math. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other factors at play. I'm just saying that, and I agree that Blumhouse has had some duds, but it's not rocket science and to figure out why, basically is what I'm saying. All right, folks, listen, that's going to do it for me here on this episode of McRae Live. Thank you for tuning in. I want to thank, of course, my moderators, Frank Riker, Tab of the Short, Darren Sands, Chris Baber, Cody Snyder. Thank you for doing what you guys do. And also thank you to the Super Chats that came in today as well. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much for the Super Chats. Appreciate you supporting the channel on that level. And thank you to my members as well. I really appreciate you all being members here on the channel. It means a lot. That is going to do it for me. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. I will be back soon with another topic, of course. And yeah, stay safe out there, and I will talk to you all soon. Hey, if you want to follow me on social media, you're not already, all my links are in the description. Check them out until your heart's content. And when your heart is content, check them out again. That'll do it for me. In the meantime and in between time, I will talk to you soon. Cheers.